Bet on Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way. Pat, the designer, Courtney Cronin, we are back together yet again. For the people who are on Twitter still freaking out, you may need to post an update video, Courtney. She's alive.
I'm alive. I'm alive and I'm well. It was honestly, let me toot my own horn here, for as calm as I stayed under pressure, where's my interview for the Bears head coach opening? Like, I exuded confidence. I exuded a plan. I stayed there. I didn't divert course. I didn't mess up a timeout. I did a pretty good job, all things considered. My biggest fear in my life coming to fruition randomly on a Monday afternoon. But it's I'm here and alive and well, and will never be taking an elevator as long as I live.
I think that's the story there. The fact that me and you both share a similar irrational fear, because if
I'm glad to know that so many people feel this way. I thought I was the only one. I'm like 34 years old. I'm like, I kind of want to take the stairs because I'm scared of this. There are a lot of people out there who have confirmed that I am not crazy because of my fear of elevators.
If an elevator opens and it's still moving, I'm on the stairs everywhere else the rest of the day. It screws up my week. I get great exercise in, but it will throw you off completely. So I'm glad you're okay. Glad that we can do this pod. And as a reward, we get to talk about the Bears coaching search. Dang it. But Mike McCarthy became available yesterday, which is very interesting. Got to talk about how quickly do we think the Bears will get him in. It seems like, remember, he was somebody Bears wanted to interview, but now you can, and you can interview him right now. Will he be somebody that gets the Zoom treatment as well? Bears are up to 9 interviews, so we got to talk about some of those names that are on that list. And I talked about this with Shay on yesterday's show, and I want to bring this up with you. Does this just kind of feel like the Bears front office flexing their muscle and saying, we're going to find your coordinators for you with this up to 19, if McCarthy comes in, I believe, candidate list? All that and more in today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Outside of the madness with the elevator, Courtney, how are you doing?
I'm good. I should be asking you this question. How much are you sleeping? How is the new baby? How's mom doing?
Everybody's good. Baby boy is he's still in the NICU, so he's gonna be there for a little while. They gotta, let him finish growing. He came a little early on us, 34 weeks, but off oxygen. So he's breathing just regular air. I said this yesterday, and I've said this a couple of times. Feet and hands are huge.
Okay.
I'm getting left tackle vibes. We may have something here in the future. His foot is like the size of my thumb. I was like, this is not normal for a child, is it? I don't know. But he's doing good. Mom is doing good. And there's plenty of no sleep going around. If I'm not up dealing with the fact that my daughter has been with her grandparents for a week and a half, which kind of puts you in it's a party every day kind of vibe. I'm up getting pumping parts for my wife for breastfeeding and all that stuff. So who needs sleep though? This is the fun part of life where you just die eventually.
What would you rather be doing, that or covering a coaching search?
I'm doing both, Courtney. That's the problem here. I'm doubling down on this. It's a lack of sleep, and then I have to wake up to the fact that Anthony Weaver one day might be my next head coach, because I know how this team kind of operates here. And if there's a guy going to get fired, you got to go hire that guy. Let's start it off with, I guess technically we're starting it off with a guy who there was a mutual parting of ways with.
It's like the first time that's been a legit, like some teams will say we've parted ways with this person. It's a fancy way of saying we fired them.
Yeah.
This was we could not come to an agreement on the terms of the contract extension because Mike McCarthy, as we know, was in the final year of his deal. The Bears put the request in last week. It was denied because they were still in their exclusive negotiating window. And then we find out on Tuesday that they're done. They're like, hey, we can't come to an agreement. He's going to go be a free agent. So there's no request that the Bears need to put in. The Saints, any team that wants to talk to him, they can talk to him now. And it's wild that Dallas went about it this way, because remember, if they didn't put request in before, I don't know what the exact cutoff date is.
Screwed now.
They can't interview anybody, any of the coordinators, coaches, anybody who's out there who's currently coaching a playoff team until that team's season is over, because the request didn't come in when it did. So the quibbles over money and years and how long this thing was going to work out, like you'd like to think that you would have had the answers in a lost season that finished 7-10, that you would have had those answers earlier than you did, but they're stuck now, and they're going to have to choose from the rest of the coaching pool because, like guys like Ben Johnson, Joe Brady, like the big names that are out there will probably be gone, you'd think, by the time that Dallas is able to, start to get in on the action, unless there's some name that we're not thinking of right now. Maybe it's Bill Belichick that would want to go to the Dallas Cowboys. It just feels like it's a really weird spot that they put themselves in, knowing that this would be their outcome if they waited until the 14th, 13th to fire Mike McCarthy or depart.
What's interesting about this is I get one of two vibes off of this. One, it feels like, as far as a Dallas point of view, right? Probably Kellen Moore would be the obvious name that's there. So maybe they have their guy locked in that they want already, that they've tried to identify. The other thing I think in this situation that's interesting is, though, that from what we heard from Tom Pelissero, from Ian Rappaport, they kind of did a deep dive into this on NFL Network. From what I gleaned from it, it sounds like they were almost trying to force a 1, maybe 2-year deal back on Mike McCarthy, which is the reason that he ends up hitting the market anyway. And I do wonder if that's going to affect them moving forward with some of these younger candidates who are like, yeah, I'm not going to a team that's doing business that way. I get it. You're Dallas. You're the star. You're America's team. I'm not saying that somebody wouldn't want the job, but that's kind of been McCarthy's fate the last couple of seasons. And realistically speaking, when you hear him talk about it and people in that building, the coaches often speak on it as if this was difficult. Like, it's hard not knowing your future.
And it's hard working for Jerry Jones because you can't challenge. Honestly, I think they're worse off where they are right now without a head coach than they were with Mike McCarthy there. And yes, this last season was way short of expectation. They didn't spend in free agency. They got really injured during the year. They lose Dak. They lose CeeDee Lamb. Like, they're dealing with, a bad defense or a defense that regressed since Dan Quinn was their defensive coordinator. And I think the whole situation plays out to where, who are you going to find that's like going to be willing to challenge Jerry Jones? He's not going to hire somebody to do that. He's not going to hire somebody to be the face or the voice of the franchise. So who are you getting? Are you getting somebody who's inexperienced? Are you getting somebody who really doesn't have enough like firepower, I guess, to like make you think, oh wow, it's a really good coach. That's a home run hire.
Yeah.
They did it to themselves. And for all of the, like, I know Mike McCarthy and the idea of moving the needle for some of these teams like the Bears, is it just a good candidate? Could it be a great candidate? Are there more intriguing options out there? That's a fair question. But Mike McCarthy was pretty stable in his 5 seasons outside of this year in Dallas.
Yeah.
And I think that has to be taken into consideration for why it doesn't look great right now, that the Cowboys, in an incomplete year with Dak Prescott, they got an incomplete grade after this season because you couldn't see what Dak Prescott with the contract extension at this point of his career was like under Mike McCarthy.
Right.
And now you're like, all right, so you're going to have to be starting over in a lot of different places. But I will say this on like the rumored, the idea that the contract extension like wasn't, they were fighting over years, length of it. I think that was for Mike McCarthy specifically, where show us that this was just a blip on the radar sort of year, that you can get the team back on track. I would imagine for most head coaching candidates, though, people who would be first-time head coaches or somebody with pedigree that wants to go into a place like Dallas, you're not looking at like a 1-and-1 more or less, or like, a contract that's on the short-term deal. You want to give a longer-term contract. But there's a lot of things we have to factor in. Jerry Jones is in his 80s. How many more years is he going to be conducting business for the Dallas Cowboys? Doesn't seem like he's slowing down. I'm not being an ageist. I'm just being realistic about it. So I think that when they think about their next head coach and why they were willing to like say, well, Mike, here's a prove it deal more or less for being the head coach, which you don't typically see in Jim Harbaugh did it at Michigan a couple of years ago after the COVID season, and then, won him a national championship. You don't. But I'm not surprised that Dallas approached him with that, just given the circumstances of how they finished this year and how they feel that they were way short of expectation, and wanting to see, like, you don't want to lock into McCarthy for, like, he might be the best answer in the short term. long-term he might not be. So that could be their rationale of like, let's just see if you can get it back on track next year. And if not, we're going to part ways with you then. And if he said no to that, it's because he clearly believes that he can go get a head coaching job somewhere else. Or maybe he wants a year off of coaching. He did it before when he left Green Bay and then came to the Dallas Cowboys. Could he do it again? Sure. But there's also 5 other head coach openings right now, from Chicago to the Jets to the Saints to the Raiders. I know I'm forgetting one more. Jaguars. That he could be interested in. And why not? Like, if you're him, why not test the waters while you have like some pretty decent pull with your name right now, and more experience than anybody that's currently, except for Pete Carroll, that's currently among the head coaches in the coaching cycle.
Now, is this all a ploy for Jerry Jones to shoot another scene in Landman where he can get some real emotion out of that, which was phenomenal? What a scene. I got to give Jerry credit for that. You went from Landman to this. This is a tough one, but that was a great Emmy-winning scene that you put on there. That's a supporting role scene right there. The one thing I do want to bring out, though, with this whole situation now is this was, dare I say, probably the first name the Bears requested. I
don't know if it was the first. I just know that like last week when the season ends and the bigger names start to come out. So, of course, it was like Ben Johnson right away, Aaron Glenn. Some of it, and then of course, like some of the other names like Drew Petzing, Anthony Weaver, guys they've already conducted interviews with were among the first names. But like this was a surprise name last Tuesday where it's like, whoa, they want to interview Mike McCarthy. Isn't he still the Dallas Cowboys head coach? And it makes you wonder, just like when they say they're going to have candidates that might surprise you, is this the one, or is there something else that we haven't seen yet?
If this is the one, we're doing okay. Because when he said that, I was like, my God, we're going to go get the tight ends coach from like the Panthers because he showed some fight out there. What do you believe right now with everything that we know that happened in Dallas? Listen, he was good in Dallas, but the playoff woes are what the playoff woes are. Mm-hmm. What do you believe Mike McCarthy brings to this Bears team that may actually entice them and have them going, while we may love Ben Johnson, we don't know what the Raiders are going to do. Tom Brady's going to get to glaze Ben Johnson basically for 3.5 hours, and we're all going to have to listen to it. If we lose out on him, McCarthy's a great option.
I think he goes in, and his biggest sell is that not that he got Dak when Dak was a rookie or Aaron Rodgers when Aaron was a rookie, but at the point of their career where you can go 2 different ways. You could just kind of stay where you are, because Dak was drafted in 2016, had a great offensive line that like was, built around him initially. And Aaron Rodgers, when Mike McCarthy, kind of got him in, like, look at what he did with those 2 quarterbacks. Like, he didn't make them, but he helped mold them into who they are. Guys who are in the MVP mix, guys who win MVPs, guys who, can go and win a Super Bowl like he did with Aaron Rodgers. I think that's your number one selling point, and that you have a young quarterback here in Caleb Williams. You can build an offense, these West Coast principles that are within Mike McCarthy's scheme that are quarterback friendly. Like everything we've heard about, the offense right now, and like how this whole thing, what they need to fix. They need to scheme up some things that are easier for the quarterback. So how do you do that? You put it, like I heard Dan Orlovsky say this, I think it was the last week of the season, or maybe the week before when they played Philadelphia. He said that he found like the Cowboys offense to be a little outdated. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing to a degree, because it felt like he was talking about like some simple concepts that, might have been like a poor man's version of what Matt LaFleur is running in Green Bay. I think with off of play action, off of getting the quarterback out and on the move, like that could really benefit someone like Caleb Williams. So I think you go in and you celebrate those wins that you have, not just like the 3 straight 12-win seasons, but the wins that you have with quarterbacks and developing them and showing that there's sustainability with the way that you train these guys and the way that you expect them to, expect them to fit in your offense, which can apply to Caleb Williams. But then again, there's all the other stuff too, where it's like, great regular season team for the last 3 years, collapsing in the playoffs, whether it's how poorly they played against the Green Bay Packers last year, to Mike McCarthy and the game management stuff against the San Francisco 49ers in the playoffs in back-to-back years, clock management, Dak not knowing that he had to spot the ball first with the referee in the wild card round, and then clock runs out on them. All of those things are inexcusable. And this is the most penalized team in the NFL since 2020, since he got there. So those are things that you have to weigh, I think, equally as much as just like all the good stuff that came with Mike McCarthy. But I understand a lot of Bears fans too right now are upset about the fact that he's probably going to interview at some point this week for this job. He may not, he's a good name, and he's coached some good football teams, and he's won. Is he the most intriguing name out there? No, and nobody's going to say that, but it's a solid, safe pick if you're looking for the solid, safe pick based on whatever happens with the rest of your candidate pool. Like right now, they're up to 9 in-person interviews. I don't know when they're going to stop in terms of the first round because there's still so many names from people from playoff teams that they have to bring into Zoom interviews before they can bring anybody in the building of current coaches on these teams. January 20th. Yeah. But it's a lengthy process right now. And I'm not surprised at all that they're trying to do their due diligence and say, hey, well, he's available. He's won a Super Bowl. He's coached 2 other teams and done pretty well with it until the end. Let's see what we can get out of him.
Yeah. I mean, listen, and McCarthy, because there's been a parting of ways, he can come into the building, I believe. So I would hope that you're not sitting there trying to do the whole Zoom thing there, although it seems like they want to keep things consistent. Here's my thing with him is you've seen him with the exact style of quarterback that you hope that you have be successful. You've seen him call a system, and I get it, right? I heard the same thing. Dan Orlovsky, a system's outdated, and there's some things that you have problems, but it works. We're calling it outdated in a 7-10 season where Cooper Rush looked pretty good, as he always does whenever he's in a McCarthy system. And even Trey Lance came in that final game and looked pretty solid. That means there's something there that feels like it works for developing the quarterback. I heard Yurko today. He's probably one of 5 people that read that Aaron Rodgers book. And Rodgers credits Mike McCarthy for turning him into the quarterback that he is. Now, Aaron Rodgers probably still becomes Aaron Rodgers. When you're that great, you find a way to be that guy. But how he taught him, there's a ton of pre-snap stuff for the quarterback. Caleb Williams had to deal with a ton of pre-snap stuff this year. There's a ton you have to learn, but if you figure it out, it makes the play that much easier. I think those are things that are intriguing about him. And listen, if we're talking about playoff woes, Courtney, I would dream for playoff woes. We've got 5-game woes.
Yeah, I think that there's a different standard when it's the Bears. When you think about, I don't know, the bar is really low. You don't necessarily need the coach to get you over the hump, just get you to the bar.
Can we get the hump?
Yeah, and then you figure out later how to get over it. You need somebody who can come in here and build a culture. And Mike McCarthy, doing it for 5 years in Dallas, doing it for, he gets fired in 2018, almost a decade, if not a little longer in Green Bay. Those are things that you can't just turn your nose up at if you're the Chicago Bears. Now, are you anywhere closer today to getting to a Super Bowl? No. I don't know if they necessarily took a step back. I just don't think that they ever really took off this year to the point where you're yes, that team feels close. We don't feel that about the Bears. No. But to get somebody in to establish some consistency, to establish an offense that's going to work for this team, a team that could not score to save its life in the first quarter of games, in the first drive of games, just the bar is already so low that you don't need to be worrying about the future. Oh, can this guy get us, can we win the NFC North with this coach? Of course, those are long-term goals that the Bears are going to have. But how about win 10 games first before you're talking about anything that's this overarching one-day sort of goal? I don't think that needs to be their focus right now by any stretch. And no, I don't think that there's any harm in hearing from someone like Mike McCarthy. Now, are there better candidates out there? Probably, based on how many interview requests and interest that we have heard is out there that the Bears have for some of these candidates. I mean, we heard reported that Marcus Freeman is somebody that's on their radar. Should he be? I don't think he's leaving college football anytime soon. I've been skeptical of that since we heard that pop up in December. Yeah. But the guy is going to go play for a national championship. He's a winner. He's taken that program from fraudulent to a winner. Like, why wouldn't you interview that guy? I'm just trying to understand their rationale, despite how many names and how many numbers this thing is getting to at the moment, where I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to go about it the way that they're doing it right now, and seeing that Mike McCarthy's available. It'd be really weird if they're interviewing everybody else and not interviewing him too.
Here's my only concern with this team. We talked about how the Bears are up to 9 interviews here, and you do wonder, okay, when does it get to crunch time? But to me, Courtney, I mean, this feels very much like what you did with the offensive coordinator search last season that ends up landing you Shane Waldron. And what I mean by that is you went through all of these guys, you interviewed probably, I think it was 7 or 8 guys.
They interviewed 9 right? For the OC opening.
3 of them end up on your staff.
2 of them.
2. I thought there was one more that we interviewed.
It was Shane Waldron and it was Thomas Brown.
And Thomas Brown were the only 2.
And then, there were 5 others who went on to be OCs elsewhere. So Liam Cohen, Greg Roman, Cliff Kingsbury, Clint Kubiak, and then there was one more that I'm forgetting right now. Zach Robinson, who went to Atlanta. So, and they were really proud of their process with that led them to Shane Waldron. Now, did they make the right hire? No, but they could at least say, hey, we were thorough. We talked to all these other people. Now, how serious were they about these candidates? Was it just about trying to create a pool? So it's like quantity over quality.
Yeah.
I think there is some debate about that, but you can't really debate that any of the other ones that got jobs were wrong, because those guys are offensive coordinators places, and everybody had a better offense than the Bears
in the playoffs. I think that is the concerning part about this whole coaching search. You look around and you go, well, Cliff Kingsbury figured it out pretty quickly, and Liam Cohen looks like he can call plays. What's Shane doing? Shane's got the rest of the year off. Oh, okay, all right, that's great. It just, here's my concern. I brought this up yesterday with Shay. This feels like you're trying to get these interviews in to build a staff. And remember, we had heard, I believe it was in the Athletic article, that the Bears wanted to be a strong front office that was going to lead the way and was going to show face. And when I look at that Matt Eberflus staff in that last year, when I look around the room and go, he worked with none of you. Why are you here? It makes me feel like the front office was like, these are the guys you can pick from. Take your pick. If that is kind of the path we're going down here again, I don't think you get any of these top names. I feel like we're doing this just to show activity over accomplishment. Sure. Ben Johnson certainly would not come here if you're trying to pick his staff. Aaron Glenn is not coming here if you're trying to pick his staff. You're going to end up with a Mike Kafka in that situation where, you essentially want a front office that can control everything that your coaching staff is doing. And I just don't think that's a real process. And what scares me is that's what it feels like with some of these names on here. I don't think Mike Kafka is a NFL head coach in the slightest. Could he be an NFL coordinator? Possibly.
I think there is something to be said about having a very deep pool like that. And if you hire somebody and that leaves somebody else that you were interested in, hey, we don't think you could be our head coach, but you can be our offensive coordinator. Most of these coaches, when they come in, I would expect all of them to have their short list of what their staffs are like, because that's what Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren are going to, and the other football people in the room, that's what they're going to want to hear. They're going to want to hear the names that are associated with who could be your OC, who could be your defensive coordinator. And most times you'll let those people then fill out their own staffs. But if you're an offensive coach, you're going to fill out your staff. You're going to fill out everybody that you want on there. Who's calling plays? Is it you? Is it your OC? Whatever it is. And I do think that, if they find somebody that they like, kind of like they did with Thomas Brown. Remember, they thought he didn't have enough play calling experience in Carolina, fair or not. And they hired him on here as the offensive coordinator, as the pass game coordinator, and then promoted him to offensive coordinator. I would not be shocked if they go that route again with hiring a head coach from the pool that they interview and then making somebody among them who might be out of contract, or, it would have to be somebody that's out of contract, I would imagine, because there's no other quarterbacks coach on any of the other roster, they're not interviewing any position coaches that would then either get blocked or not get blocked from taking this opportunity. But I'll be curious to see if somebody does make a lateral move from OC somewhere else that was interviewed by the Bears to OC of the Bears.
See, but that's my concern with this, right? Because the conversation, and I would almost say, let's be real about this. When you say I'm willing to open up the checkbook and pay for the best, we're talking about Ben Johnson. We're not.
Yeah, there's one name that like above all else right now. Once Mike Vrabel was the first domino.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we're not having a I can pay whatever I want to pay conversation for just about anybody else on this list, really. I mean, David Shaw's, you're not paying him out of the backside, right? Brian Flores is not coming in probably making the same thing that Ben Johnson is. We're talking about Ben Johnson there. If you're willing to break the bank to get your guy, if that's really what they want to do, why would you then not let him make the big money decisions? Why are you interviewing potential offensive coordinators, potential defensive coordinators? And you know, the name that popped up Sunday, Ron Rivera. When I heard that, I was like, I don't know why they would want Ron as a head coach at this point. I would love Ron as a DC.
Ron's in his early 60s, though. Like, it's not like he's been, like washed up and hasn't done this. He was, Ron has been around for a while, and he's been a good coach. Like, he had all those years with the Panthers. It didn't work out at the end, but I think the experience he has as a defensive coach and certainly as a head coach and his ties to the organization, I'm not surprised at all. If he wants to get back in, it's kind of like Pete Carroll. Why wouldn't you offer him an interview? That's how I view it. I didn't think it was a bad thing.
I don't think it's a bad thing, but it just doesn't feel like
like they're taking the process seriously.
Is that a serious interview? Is that somebody you're seriously considering as your head coach? It doesn't feel like that's the direction the Bears want to go. Seems like they want to find somebody for Caleb Williams. That's why we've seen the Joe Brady. I mean, most of this list is offensive guys or offensive coordinators. It's why immediately they rush out to reach out to Mike McCarthy. But when I see a name like Ron Rivera on the list, I go, okay, I get it. 85 Bear, you're giving him the common courtesy of the interview and you're going through that process with him. But at the end of the day, does he fit this current team as a head coach? In fact, one of your highest paid players on this team said the culture with Ron Rivera was a little bit toxic. Now, whether that was more towards they weren't the Commanders at that point. What were they when Ron was there? They were the Washington football team. Did he have a year when they were the Commanders? I thought but the Washington football team, there wasn't a lot there that wasn't toxic. But did Ron add to that? Those are the things where I look at it and I go, you're going through this list of guys and you're trying to confuse us with activity over accomplishment when it clearly feels like there's one guy that you want over the rest.
Yeah. And it's like, why, if there is somebody, I know the question that has been raised to me a lot is if they really love Ben Johnson, why won't they do whatever it takes to go get Ben Johnson?
Yeah.
Well, if doing one of those things is blowing up your front office, which they have kind of shut down the idea of that, then why would they just like give in to what he wants? So like very clearly, I think they've got to find the right fit, knowing that the person coming in does have a blank slate to a degree, but also has to like fall in line with some of the other things. You don't have as much freedom here to change inner workings of the organization as the head coach coming in, because you've got Kevin Warren, who's running, he's over everything. He's over the president and CEO. He's over football operations. He's over the business side. He's at the top of the food chain below George. And then Ryan Poles is right below him. Like, structure is one thing. I also think that, to be able to get somebody in here who understands like what their role in all of this is going to be, not saying that you have to be a dissenting voice, but and try to shake things up, but you also can't be a pushover in it. Like, you got to strike a happy medium here, which I don't know. When Waddle and Sylvie did a thing last week when they were doing like coaching, like they had a bunch of us on like to give our prediction. I didn't say any of the top candidates. I didn't say Mike Vrabel. I didn't say Brian Flores. I didn't say Ben Johnson. I said Joe Brady, because to me, the way that they're doing their search, because it isn't as narrow as like we're only going after our top people. A lot of this could be information gathering too, which is fine. Like if that's the way they want to do it, it's a lengthy process to do it, but they don't want to be making these hires every couple of years. Like if that's truly the way you feel that this will land you because you vetted everybody else, like land you the best candidate, then I guess more power to you. But I will say that within all of this, it does feel like the process is a little watered down right now, just because there are so many names and there's not a lot of time left. It's the middle of January, more or less. And you would think by the end of this week that they've got to get that list down to like who their second interviews are going to be, so they can then start focusing in on, are they hiring somebody who's going to be an offensive minded coach or defensive minded coach? What about the staffs? Because that's a big part of it too, like getting the coaching staffs together.
No, 100%. That's the one thing for me that I think you almost have to be a little bit like, okay, well, even if you're compiling this list of guys who could possibly be coordinators and things like that, are these the big money guys? Mm-hmm. Are these the guys that you're going to spend? Because when you talk about opening up the bank, and I think this is the one thing that I do like about kind of what the Bears process is, it's talked about not as we're just paying big money to Ben Johnson, then he's got to go out and get $500,000 coordinators. Like, Ben Johnson is one of the highest paid coordinators in the NFL. Aaron Glenn's on that list as well. It makes sense that these guys are good coordinators because they're being paid as such, and there's a lot of responsibility put on them in Detroit. You're seeing that play out. Even with, and I'll give it, this almost reminds me of the Chargers, what they did last year with the amount of coaches they were searching, but knowing it felt like the entire time they wanted Jim Harbaugh. It felt like the entire, like if he leaves, we're hiring him, but we need to know everything else. And I wonder if that is kind of a situation here, because remember when we talked to who's old boy from the Athletic from Detroit that we had on the podcast? Colton Pouncey. Mm-hmm. He said, listen, you can't just rule out that he's going to leave. They lose this season. Maybe he goes back one more year. If that's the case, that could be a reason for this list. But again, the Chargers list felt a heck of a lot more serious than some of the names on this list feel.
Yeah, it was smaller. I think a lot of people are skeptical just because it sounds like they're not taking it seriously. It sounds like they're, in a place right now where they're just like interviewing literally everyone. And it's just, I get that it feels like maybe they're doing too much with this, but I guess you'd rather have them be thorough with their process. It's very different than how it gets very different than how the Patriots went about it. They had 4 candidates. They had one, but they had to fulfill the Rooney Rule, which is hilarious that like nobody's talking about the fact they had Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton last week, put them in the same tweet to let you know they interviewed him, had Ben Johnson, had Mike Vrabel, and then yesterday Vrabel gets announced as the head coach. Like, the Bears could have done it that way, but like, I also think that they've got to be realistic. What if the top candidate that they want doesn't want to come here for a number of different reasons? And that's why I think you have to have the plan B, C, D. Obviously, you don't want to like be so far down the list that it doesn't feel like, you're at, you're like, we're just picking anybody at this point. You never want that.
Let's be real. You're getting Mike Kafka.
Like, reinventing the wheel is not something that they should do, but I think that you need to be prepared for if they don't get the top guy, which right now is widely viewed as Ben Johnson, and the steam between him and the Raiders is picking up. That's a scary place, I think, to be in unless they have done the vetting and the research on everybody else, which is, I think, the rationale for why you would expect why the search is going to take as long as it is, at least the way it looks, and why they have so many names that they're interested in.
The one thing I'll say this, and I said this yesterday, if Ben Johnson does choose the Raiders over you, I would immediately have it leaked how much we offered him. Because just listen, we offered him $15 million. He turned us down. You know what I mean? Like a situation like that, at least oh, they're serious, right? Because this almost feels, I feel like all of our teams are very similar. This almost feels White Sox-esque. Like, you're just kind of like, yeah, we were in there. Our name was in the running for it. You know what I mean?
You like close, but never landing the top guy.
And that's where it feels like you're at with the Bears. I would.
When have the Bears ever done that though? When have they ever gotten like the biggest name of the coaching cycle?
Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy was the hot name. He was the hot coordinator. He was the number one guy. He was the guy everybody wanted. And You brought him in here with Mitch. And while I don't think that Mitch is great, I do think you have to look at the fact that you brought in a guy that sets up meetings with quarterbacks and then blew them off basically to say, I don't have time to deal with you as a concern that you just overlooked in a character flaw. Mm-hmm. But the Bears have, I'll say this, the narrative that the Bears are cheap or that they won't go out and spend the money for guys, coaching wise, I think it is held true. But they have tried. They've just failed really badly at it.
Because, and it's a two-way street. Some people don't want to come to Chicago for a multitude of reasons, and that doesn't mean that they strike out on those people based on their own doing. It could just be that there's better options out there. And I don't know, we've talked about this a lot. Like, what is the best opening? Is it Chicago? I don't know. I don't really, like, the more I think about it, like,
yes, there's Jacksonville. I don't feel
I don't. Oh, I mean, the overarching thing in Jacksonville is that you've got the AFC South.
That's like
the number one thing that would set you over. But I don't know if coaches are really taking head coaching jobs based on, what division am I going to be playing in? Teams change all the time.
That and the fact that Shad Khan, while sitting next to Trent Baalke, basically was like, I'll fire this dude if I need to.
Yeah, that was funny.
That was one of the wildest things I've seen. I don't know, like when you talk about top jobs right now, maybe Raiders.
You don't have a quarterback. That's why I still think that Chicago, like, maybe I'm the only one, probably not. But I still feel like the Bears are one of the best jobs, if not the best job, because you have somebody who has not been taught so much, like 2-3 years in, that they have to do all this undoing. You still have a moldable piece of clay in Caleb Williams that you can mold into your franchise quarterback. You have $80+ million in cap space next year. You have 4 picks in the top 72. There's a lot to like about this job.
And he's been in a screwed up situation.
Gonna get a new stadium at some point.
He's been in a screwed up situation all year, and he doesn't look broken from it.
Yeah.
Like, I think those are the things where you do feel good about it. It's going to be interesting to see. Let's finish it up with this, Courtney. By the way, hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. We're up to 9 interviews. There's a lot more to go here. Mm-hmm. January 20th is when everybody can kind of start coming in the building that are of the eliminated teams and stuff like that. When does crunch time set in? Or is this for the Bears? Is this Ben Johnson or bust? If he makes the Super Bowl, we're waiting.
Let's see. The 20th is Monday of next week. Yep. I put the over under at like the 27th right now. So that's like 2 weeks from today that like we'd hear something leak out about who they're hiring. Because that's the week that they're, I believe, going to the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
Crunch time, though, should be next week. It should be like, you can't be on certainly they wouldn't be on their first round of interviews still. That's when you've really got to start to narrow it down, because other teams that don't have nearly as many candidates as you in their candidate pool can start offering those jobs. Be like, we really want you. And if there's another team that wants somebody and that candidate says, hey, I'm letting you guys know I'm going to take this job. Are the Bears prepared then at that point? Have they done enough vetting and research to know, okay, we are in position to, you have to be in position to offer somebody a job if you know they're going to go somewhere else. That to me is like the first thing when it gets to crunch time. It's like, do you have enough information to know if it really came down to it and Ben Johnson was like, hey, Vegas is offering me, but Chicago's my second choice, hypothetically. Could you be in a spot where you're ready to pull the trigger and say, we'll forgo the rest of our interviews, the rest of our process, and hire this guy right now because we don't want to see him go? That's the point that I think they have to get to next.
Yeah, that's my one concern with this whole process. If you're all in on your guy, listen, the Rooney Rule's wild, right? And nobody's following it per se if they know they have their guy. The Patriots, it's Boston. You know what I mean?
Sure, we knew that. We knew that the day that Gerard Mayo was fired.
They knew they wanted Vrabel.
Mm-hmm.
And dare I say, they probably knew they wanted Vrabel last year. And so you went through the process you had to go through. Vrabel shows up. You don't let him leave without a contract there. To me, if Ben Johnson's your guy and you're talking opening the checkbook here, you already know what's about to happen this coming weekend with Tom Brady being able to call the game, the pitch that he's making. I don't know how you can do both of these at the same time. It's kind of wild. But you know the process that the Raiders are going to be going through. Oh, by the way, you've got a guy that's going to be hyping him up for 3.5 hours and just singing his praises with everything that he does. you need to, in my mind, act a heck of a lot quicker because the Raiders are pulling out no stops. And you've got the greatest quarterback in the world locked in on you. And I know there's some people that are like, well, he's a minority owner. It's not going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah, kind of feels like he's got a lot of say in how this search is going.
And you think Magic Johnson had no say in anything that's going on in Washington? You think that when Magic Johnson walks in the room, flashes you the Showtime smile and shakes your hand and talks about what it takes to win championships, young guys aren't listening? Like, those are the things that I think you can't overlook if you're the Chicago Bears. I love you, Ryan Poles. It wasn't a great NFL career for you. This dude's got 7 rings that are going to be speaking loudly when he talks to a head coach about, this is what I need to see to get a championship here in Vegas. That's going to be a leg up on you no matter what.
Yeah, and I mean, and truly, if it is a deal breaker for him to bring his own GM, he's going to go to the place that allows him to do that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. We'll see what ends up happening here. A lot of interviews to go, Courtney. We've got a lot of a long process ahead of us. It feels like we're going to be talking about coaching candidates for a while. Hopefully we can get to the second round of these interviews sooner than later. And there's no Anthony Weaver on that list. We appreciate you guys for tuning in and showing love. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be throwing shots at Anthony Weaver like that. He didn't deserve that. I just don't want you to coach my team. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, showing love. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page. Leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. For Courtney Cronin, it's your boy Pat the Designer back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. One love. Peace.